So anyway, listen, welcome guys. Welcome to a Blimey It's Only. It's been probably the best part of 6 months. I think the whole lockdown, people didn't want to talk. I think, to be perfectly honest with you, I think people are fed up of talking to people over webcams. But you know what? I've returned with a vengeance. And if I said I was excited about getting this guy on my stream, that would be an understatement. You've made, and I mean this 100% sincerely, Andy, the Pipeline games are in my top 10 video games of anything. They're just awesome. So anyway, I'd like to welcome Mr. Andy Walker, aka Mr. Taskset himself. The bug stops here. How you doing, Andy?
Alex, great to be here. I'm doing fine. Yeah.
Good. How's the last year been? Are you getting out the house much at all? Or?
Oh, geez, this last year's like no other, is it? The one time I want to get out of the house is to the arcade hub in Hull. That's where I want to be. I can't get there. They've got everything. They've even got pinball that I grew up with because I am that old.
Well, I think I'm not far behind you, Andy. I mean, I've obviously kind of grown up with arcades and that kind of thing. It's a special place. But I mean, I was mentioned just before we kind of went live. There's a thing called Arcade Club. It's just awesome. You basically pay, I think it's 16 quid you pay, and that's you in for the rest of the day. And there's 200, 300 machines all in free play. So I'll give you a shout. I'm actually planning to try and get down there. Maybe, well, I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I'll give you a shout. The more the merrier. I can get a minibus or something.
Yeah, I'm up for that, mate. Yeah.
I'll give you a shout. So listen, Andy, the first question I always like to ask everybody that I have on this is, what was your very first exposure to like anything computer related? What was your first kind of computer that you got to see, or was it work tied in, or what?
Yeah, it was work. Yeah, it was a Honeywell 316. I remember it really well. I was in awe of the little computing department, and they had loads of computers. I mean, loads. But they had this dinky little Honeywell 316 and a little terminal on the end. And the rest of us in the little party that was there were sort of, what does it do? Yeah. I was just transfixed. After that, electronics were never the same. Electronics were just a means to make computing. That's it for me. Mm-hmm. Oh, I got a wee kit. Had to build it, and it gave me 8 bits, 8 LEDs, and 8 switches, and that was it. There was no long-term memory, no battery backup, and you flicked a little switch to stick this bit of code in a bit of memory, and ran it, and it moved the light along the LEDs because I wrote it. And I was really chuffed. That was the first thing I'd ever written, and wow, it made me really happy.
I think that's what I was watching, and I know you've been in it. You were in the Bedrooms to Billions. I like to watch that every now and again, and I can't remember who it was. One of the guys basically said was to try and make the younger generation understand, prior to like a computer game or a computer or whatever, everything was just passive. You just looked at it, you looked at the screen, and that was it. You know, whatever you're watching, the snooker generation game, whatever, you just looked at it, and suddenly here was this thing that you could actually interact, you could actually affect what happened on the screen. And I think it was Peter Molyneux who actually said that his very first bit of code that he wrote, he got this like letter just moving across the screen, and he's like, wow. Yeah,
it was, but nobody else was doing it. And you hadn't seen it anywhere else. And suddenly you can make this happen. He's spot on. I think Kevin once said that, Kevin Toms as well. Very similar experience for him, that as soon as you can actually bend it to your will, you can make this happen. And you press this button while the light's just going from left to right, and it goes right to left. Great, that'll do for me. That's the start.
Yeah, and Jeff Minter said the same thing. He said, I think his story was he was at a polytechnic, I think it was Reading or something, and he wandered into this room, and there was a guy sitting at this TV. He's, what are you doing? He says, oh, I'm playing a computer game. What do you mean? And then when he suddenly realised that he could actually he said it was like a box of magic. The world was your oyster. You could make games, you could make things, and he said that was it. And here we are, 40 years on. We're still talking about them, and I still get as excited now. Not so much with modern systems, but the fact that I can play Galaxian arcade in my kitchen is like just blows my mind.
Yeah, absolutely, and good choice as well. Galaxian was a real milestone, wasn't it?
Aye.
It broke away from Invaders. The hardware that it spawned ran hundreds of different games. A lot of them were made for Galaxian boards, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. I think the fact that we went from like Space Invaders, which was obviously, it was grey, I think it was, or green, and suddenly here was this multicoloured thing sparkling away. The very first time I saw Galaxian, we went. I was actually down at Heathrow Airport with my folks, and I saw and heard this thing from about 500 yards away, and I could see all these lights glowing away, and you're like, oh, and it's. And I'm like, can I have a shot, Mum? No, come on, hurry up.
No time for that. Yeah,
I've not got 10 pence. We can't afford 10 pence.
But you are hooked already.
Aye, that's it. So what was the very first computer you ever owned then, Andy?
The one I owned, it was a Microtan. That's what it was. It was a 6502 kit. Tangerine computers. Made up little boards, needed a soldering in. Electronics were my thing in those days. So building one of these was, that's easy.
So what were you doing job-wise at that point before you kind of started programming computers?
I used to work for the government. I was with GCHQ for 10 years. And that was where I first came across digital things. I was really, the electronics were high-frequency electronics, extremely high-frequency electronics, and I was quite good at that. But I wanted to do digital, and they wouldn't send me on the right courses. I was desperate to get involved in that. I fiddled about with this Honeywell in the corner for a wee while, and then built up this little 8080 kit. And it's more like a scamp kit. The first bit, actually, that's true, yeah. The first bit was 4-bit, not even 8-bit. But because I could make it happen, I just wanted more of it. So, long story short, I was in the wrong job, so I quit.
Yeah, and then we know what happened after that. When did you? So I've written down some questions. I'm trying to be professional and pretend that I'm making them up, but I haven't because I need to read them. But so when you first bought the computer, did you buy it to play games? Was it for tinkering, or did you really want to program? And if so, if it was the latter, at what point did you realise that you were more interested in writing games than actually playing them?
Oh yeah, definitely. I knew it before I'd started. Do you ever remember a Texas Instruments printer, a Silent 700?
I don't. That was my first computer, the Texas TI-1994A. I had that for about 6 months, and I couldn't get any games for it, so I sold it and got a Commodore 64.
We had in the department, they had literally thousands of these Silent 700 printers, and they were thermal printers. But before that, teleprinters were the order of the day in there, and that was like really noisy. So these things came along really quiet. But what they hadn't worked out was that there was a technician mode built into it, where you could just press a function key and have a pre-stored phrase pop up. And depending on which key they pressed next, it would give you phrase 2. So you can make up all sorts of, certainly not rude, but amusing little signs to build in, because the people that were using them out in the field had no idea about the tech mode. And suddenly they would break into a conversation with a printer. So that amused me enough. So I already knew it. I didn't actually get fired for that. But it was funny. And I could see immediately that, oh gosh, I really need to be doing this. This is where it's at.
Mm. So it just you got the hook, and then that was it. You thought, this is for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I quit, luckily, domestic management agreed. We just sold up, and I said, I'm going to open a cafe for a while at the seaside, make some money, and then all winter long I can write. And she said, yeah, okay. Brilliant. That's good, isn't it?
Dream come true. So
Yeah.
what was the sort of the first programs that you wrote? Was it just like tinkering with things, or did you actually think I want to write a game, or what how did you kind of flow with the programming?
Yeah, I was really, really naive. I didn't know anything about the arcade industry, except I spent, like most teenage kids, grew up on pinball and mechanical counters and things.
Mm-hmm.
So I set off writing some counters and bits and pieces that would, because I knew what to expect, and I knew how I wanted them to move, and I couldn't do it. So I needed to learn about character generators, and that was no good. So I needed to start and learn about bitmap graphics, and I just lived on the phone a bit to Tangerine Computers and said, what do I do? What do I do with your character generator? Oh, nobody messes with that. You're like, oh, right, yeah. Okay. So I fiddled about with it until I got what I wanted. And said, right, well, better go and rent a factory. I'm going to build some machines. So I was, ridiculously naive. I really thought that's all you had to do. Didn't know anything about coin acceptors or making money out of it. Hadn't got a business plan. Should never have succeeded.
The thing is, I suppose, again, watching Bedrooms to Billions, listening to like Andrew Hewson, I was lucky enough to actually, I had a panel interview with Andrew Hewson down at Blackpool 2 years ago. I interviewed him, and they were all saying the same. It says there was no template. It was just like it was a thing that geeks did, and they just made it up as you went along. There was it was literally, it was just evolving constantly, wasn't it?
It was, but it was at pace, wasn't it? Stuff was happening in front of your eyes. There was no social media. There was no internet. There was nothing. So you were in your own little bubble. And gosh, how much easier it would have been if you could have just swapped some code fragments with people and said, look, this works on 6502. And to be honest, hand on heart, I still prefer assembler to everything else. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I still write it. I was writing some assembler today at work. And some very bright lads work with me, and they do all the modern languages and a couple of older ones too. But they're right into HTML5. I'll do all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. But they're stitching together an awful lot of stuff. And I just like to count the machine cycles and make it happen a bit quicker. I am that sad.
Awesome. So at what point did you actually, what was the sort of first program or game that you wrote and sold it, and you thought, wait a minute, there's money to be made here? Yeah,
it was, again, it was nuts. It would be Andromeda. That's what it would be. With the late, great Tony Gibson. I'd set up. I remember Tangerine, and I'd talked them into giving me a motherboard that I could plug the processor board into. And then they came up with a memory board, which was a black and white screen, really, just a bitmap screen. So I got 3 of those and made it an RGB drive so I could get some color out of the thing. That worked. I built a soundboard, so that worked. And I didn't even have a 2-pass assembler. When you wrote code, you wrote it at a specific address. So the routine to do something starts at 400 and it finishes at, I don't know, 4A0 or something. So the next one, you might decide to leave a bit and start the next routine at 4C0 because the first routine might need a mod. So you could expand
you need to leave a bit of space, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that sort of, yeah.
Because things were at fixed addresses. So it was a complete, it should never have worked. It had no right to succeed. So wrote Andromeda,
Was that on the C64, Andy?
No, it was
No,
before that.
That was on the Tangerine. Yeah.
So I said, right then, because I can do RGB now, I'll find somebody who does color monitors. As well as running the cafe, I sold monitors and bits and pieces to the Open University to make a bit of money. Because you don't make much in the winter. It's a very long winter on the east coast of England, isn't it? So did that, had the components, built it up, and one day I could see that there was a trade show down in London at the Hammersmith, and said, right then, we'll go there and see who's doing what. It was as near as you could get to networking. So chucked all this stuff in the back of a rented Nissan van and rocked up at the show. Set it up, said, look, that's Andromeda. And you plug this card in, look, and now it's the pit as well. Ha ha. I'd got a video jukebox that nobody else had got. And I was worth about £4 alongside London Coin and Taito and a few other people. No right to succeed, but met some really interesting people.
So when was that? What year did you release this Andromeda? When would that be?
Oh, it started around, was it 82, something like that?
Yeah,
something like that. When was Frogger released? Because that was just about to go. It was on a preview.
Right.
So that's when it was.
Early, maybe 80, 81, something like that. It'd be certainly an
early 80s anyway.
Yeah, certainly an early game. So obviously your most sort of thing with to the Commodore 64. So how did you? I mean, I'll rewind a wee bit. Taskset. How did that come about?
Yeah, because I was writing for the coin-op industry, along with Tony and Andy Rickson as well, and we shouldn't be succeeding in an international market. Just three blokes in a back room in here. but it did. It went really well. But the bottom was falling out of the arcade industry. It just blew up really in America. They fitted them everywhere till there was no space left to put a cabinet down.
Yeah.
And it imploded completely. But just before that happened, I was looking around for, home computers were still the thing. That Tangerine, not so much. I still love 6502 though. And I was looking at the Spectrum and thinking, should we? And then I was sort of looking at VIC-20. I thought that was quite a nice little machine. But I could hear noises from America that what was coming was so much better. Was C64 was on the horizon. So that's what we did. We actually sat and waited. We did bits and pieces on an Auric, I think. Yeah. And that was, again, because it was comfortable for us. 6502 again, but we knew the first games we were writing for those were just treading water until C64 came along. Wow, what a revelation it was. It just beat the pants off everything.
So see, going back to your working, so did you actually write any arcade games then?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask what they were?
Andromeda was one. The Pit was another. Hunter was another. The Pit did really well. And
who published that, Andy?
Sorry?
Who actually published these games then? Who?
Centuri of America.
Wow.
Our market was abroad. And I did a great deal with Xylec. A guy called Norman Parker ran Xylec. And it was his agent that I bumped into at the trade show. And that's where the connections were made. But it was a time, like you said, everything was expanding ridiculously. And there was no template. So he said, can we take the Pit game? Oh no, sorry. He took the video jukebox and we set it up in downtown Miami, and everybody really wanted to play the pit. They did play Andromeda and the Hunter, but only by accident, really. So he said, look, why are we selling 3 titles here in one cabinet? Why don't we sell them 3 titles? Yeah, okay, whatever you think's right. And away he went. We just then got a royalty because he could have it rewritten onto Z80. I'm trying to think. It was Centuri Electronics of Miami. They had developed their own custom hardware and wanted to write the game themselves. Yeah, I'm not precious about it. We do that, give us $120 a board, and I'm happy.
I mean, that's quite an achievement. I mean, three working class blokes from Bridlington writing, putting out games where Atari were putting out games and Tato and all these, and you were.
Yeah.
But that kind of explains, which I'll talk about later on. That explains the arcade feel of what a lot of the Taskset games became. And I didn't realise that you were involved in the arcades, but that does make a lot of sense. So how did Taskset come about then? Obviously, that was you weren't putting the games out for the Tangerine at that point. The C64 eventually arrived.
Yeah, exactly that. So I had something of an arcade pedigree then, because we also contracted work from Xylec to finish some of their games. The games had been started by Chris Stamper.
Oh, yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
And another lad called John, who was really talented hardware engineer. And that was all going very well, but the writing was on the wall for the whole of the arcade industry. And again, it was something new. The home industry was just blossoming. You could see it massively growing week by week. We needed to be part of it. So that's what we wanted to do. And Mark Buttery joined us along with Paul Hodgson. And so it's sort of, we had a house which had a shop attached to it. So the front room of the shop was Taskset, and the back room was AW Electronics, still writing for Coin-Op on contract. And so we'd just cross over between the two. And it had to be a giggle or it wasn't any good.
That is awesome. So how did the name, and you've got quite a distinctive logo. Is that a Jump Jet Harrier or something? Is it? How did that come about? How did the name come about? Firstly,
what Taskset?
Yeah,
it was off the shelf. I needed a company. Suddenly, I'd grown an accountant somewhere, and he said, "You need to be a limited company, and you're getting lots of royalties from export, and they don't attract VAT." And he was talking some language I had no idea what he was talking about. He said, "You need a company," so I went and got one, and it was called Taskset. That was.
But when you say off the shelf, was it like a list of companies, or you pick one? Or
yeah, it was just the next one available. What popped up? Taskset. Yeah, I'll do that. £60. Thank you.
I'll have that. Yeah.
And the logo. Roy Lichtenstein was a hero of mine for artwork, and his Wham posters.
Right.
Tremendous. So
very cartoony.
Yeah. So that's what we're having, something like that. So the guy over the road, was a retouch specialist for the graphics industry on Vogue magazine in Little Bridlington, for goodness sake. He said, "Oh, I can do that for you." Yeah, okay. Yeah, and it was something like £70. That was it, done.
Awesome.
Magic.
Because it's a really, I mean, it was a really distinctive looking sort of brand, wasn't it? It jumped out. It was visually, all the games were visually appealing. They were very good, high graphic quality, a lot of colour in that as well. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's Andy Rickson, and gosh almighty, as a computer artist, he was just awesome, because quite a lot of artists, I'm sorry for your artist listeners here, are quite a long way up their own ass at times. and Andy wasn't. He was just a bloke. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. What about this? Well, I can't get 8 legs out of this. I can give you 6-legged spiders, but I can't give you 8. Like, go on, that'll be all right. Yeah, we'll use them. And Paul Hodgson was great, as well as really humorous games and ditties that he wrote, and especially in music, was very, very good at writing utilities. And so we wrote together all of the graphic utilities that we were going to use, and Andy Rickson just turned them into humorous things. So yeah, it was about having a laugh and pointing at the screen and saying, yeah, that's it. Yeah, especially if it was Friday, let's clear off, we're done.
I think it's obvious that you guys must have been having a lot of fun making these games. You know, it really was with the humour. So the bug stops here. Was that kind of like a nod to games being properly bug tested or something?
They were shocking, weren't they, the early ones? Remember Virgin Games Sheepdog, which was a flashing asterisk unless it had crashed, in which case it was just a static asterisk. And they sold it. You think, no.
There's a game that was released. I can't remember what it's called. I should know. I can't remember for the life of me what it's called. That came out in the Spectrum, and believe it or not, it was a multi-screen platformer. And the guy forgot to. Basically, you couldn't move. You couldn't move. You couldn't get off the first screen because you physically couldn't move. And it was only maybe in the last few years that somebody went in and he'd put like a comma or something like that. Yeah. So how that got past quality control is beyond me. You physically could not move, so the game was unplayable, utterly unplayable.
Unbelievable, but still released.
Brilliant.
So Nintendo were awful for that. I did write for Nintendo for a while.
Oh, really?
You just needed to give them a solid 3 months before you heard back from them, and they just tested it. Slightest thing was wrong, they told you nothing for 3 months and then threw it out.
So, I've heard they're quite a kind of finicky company to work for. So obviously the lion's share of kind of Taskset games came out in the C64. Was that a kind of conscious decision based on you really thought that the hardware was excellent and it suited with sprites and obviously great sound as well?
Yeah, absolutely that. Vic and Sid just made it. It was nice to have a sensible processor, but it was the custom chips that made that machine just such an eye-opener, isn't it? I still don't think that we scratched the surface. Really wanted to get more and more out of it.
Yeah.
Mark and I and Andy loved the graphics, and Paul Hodgson and I really loved the SID chip, and Paul was into the theory of music as well, so he wrote all of the background utilities needed for that, because there was nothing you could get off the shelf, and if there was, well, we could write it better. Bit arrogant, but it was total ownership of what you were publishing. It wasn't borrowed from anybody else. It wasn't a library, and it certainly wasn't a language. It was all your own work, if you like.
And nowadays, some of the games that they're putting out now for like the C64 and Spectrum. I mean, there's a game came out just a couple of days ago, which I did a video on, and it's a driving game, and you get to drive like all these old classic cars, and it is unbelievable. And you're like, it's a Spectrum. And some of the games that have come out recently in the C64, and I mean, I'm a massive SID fan. I mean, some of the music, my favourite piece of music, apart from Pipeline, obviously, is Monty on the Run. It's an absolute masterpiece. I listen to it even now, and I'm just like, that's coming out of this box. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it was obviously Mr. Hubbard has a lot to answer for in that respect. Remember when Zoids first came out? You just think that soundtrack just blew the rest of it away, and I don't think the game was that great, but it was.
No, the game wasn't. No.
So entertaining. You plug it in and you get it loaded, and you're instantly, it's worth the money now. You've done it. You've just listened to the intro. Brilliant.
I think people, even myself included, I would buy games just because the music was that good. Even like Monitoring the Run, it's a nice wee game, but I think I copied it on a double cassette or something. I used to listen to my Sony Walkman in the bus. Actually, I put out. I found a video. I mean, there's people putting out stuff all the time, and I put a demo. I just recorded it. I showed the demo on my YouTube channel, and I just basically said, this is unbelievable. And this one guy says, "No, you're at it, mate. That's not a C64." He says, "No, trust me, it is a C64." "No, you're talking shite, basically." I said, "No, trust me." So what I did was, I've got a C64 underneath the TV down there. So I made a specific video of me holding it. There you go. I'm going to load it. And he went, "I stand corrected." He says, "Might consider my mind blown." He says, "I didn't think the C64 was capable of doing that." It was like, it had like various samples, and it even had like more colours than it could possibly actually come up with. It's phenomenal. But I'm assuming that technically all these things would have been possible 30 years ago, but the fact that you were working in isolation, and I mean, nowadays I'm sure you could probably throw a game together pretty quick, because you can download routines and there's all this more information, eh?
Yeah, there's loads of game kits out, isn't there? And
yeah.
Really, you're copy and paste, and you don't really have to know too much of the library functions to get it going. And that's fine, because if at the end of it people play the game, then it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But if you just never publish anything, got to say it, being published, it was the first things I'd ever had published in my life. There's nothing like it. People have got to do it. Put something out. I don't care if you're writing a book or a magazine article, whatever you're doing, get published, because there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Coin-op is probably the harshest there is, because people are voting with their cash at the time. And I'm still in the casino world now. And it is, a good game is the one with the heaviest cash box. That's it. And it's harsh, but it's true. And for me, when things were really breaking in the coin-op world, Defender was it. Defender was absolutely it. If you could carry the cash box, you were doing well. And they had machines reported faulty because they were full of money, just full. And that's a vote, isn't it, right there? You've made it at that stage.
Yeah. It must have been quite amazing for you to wander into, W.H. Smith back in the day and see all your games. That must have been pretty special.
It is. It makes you feel like you shouldn't feel this good looking at it. It's really shallow, but honestly, it's so good. It really is. And we did. The boys and me as well. That when you see something in, I don't know, unexpected areas pop up where suddenly the cassettes are on show, or later the discs. It's difficult to say what a feeling it is. It drives you to the next one. And, you must not get hung up on the fact that somebody's copied what you've done, or somebody's ripped off something, or somebody's just forget it. It'll just make you gnarled and grisly. Don't do that. Just say that's a compliment. Get on with the next one and stay ahead of them. Think of something.
Yeah. Keep pushing the boundaries. So, did you? I mean, you obviously programmed for the C64. Did you or any other guys program for other machines? I think you did put out a few Spectrum games, eh?
Yeah, and what was it? Amstrad as well.
Oh, did you put out games for Amstrad as well? Or was it? I didn't. Aye.
It's all Z80 stuff, though, isn't it? A lot of the early coin-op stuff was Z80 as well, so it wasn't uncommon. We all understood that as well. But it was, you get a favorite. I think my favorite processor ever was 68,000. A pure one, not 68 340s and things that came later. It was it was 32 bits wide. And the registers, it's just a joy. Some of the opcodes in there, where you can get 3 levels of indirection in one line of assembler, and it was just astronomical.
You're speaking complete double Dutch to me, because I'm a complete numpty. I was the gaming. I was never into the programming, purely because I couldn't do it. Andy, just give me 2 seconds. I've got 2 dogs scratching at my door to get into the bedroom. I'll just go and let them in. 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Come on, hurry up. In you come. Right, up. Up you get. Right, Jax, in. Go on, in. Right, in you go. In.
Whereabouts did you say you were? Whereabouts did you say you were in the land? You were Livingston?
Livingston, yeah. I don't know if you... Do you know this kind of neck of the woods at all?
No, not enough. I know Glasgow ever so slightly. Even before computing, I was on the ships. I was a radio officer on Merchant Navy.
Oh, right, okay.
To get just across the Atlantic to Canada and back, and then on a wee cargo boat round the Mediterranean, but then went to pick up whiskey in Glasgow.
What else?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Glasgow docks, they're
on the Clyde,
quite a place. But the Clyde, honestly, we'd had such a shit trip, but the sun came out over the Clyde on that morning, just going up there at a few knots, really calm, and everything just fell away. It was a beautiful, beautiful day.
You need to come up here sometime. If you're ever up here, give me a shout. We'll get out for a beer. But yeah, it's a beautiful. I mean, especially if you go like north of like Crianlarich into the Highlands. It's just. I was up in Oban last weekend with my girlfriend, and it's the best place ever. It's quite funny because we went to a place called Oban's away on the west coast, and then you can jump on the ferry to the Isle of Mull, and then you jump on it. You can then get the bus to a little port, and it takes you over to an island called Iona. And Iona's, I think you could walk around Iona in probably about an hour. And when we got back, I mean, there is nothing on Iona. There's Highland cows. I don't know if you remember he was a Labour MP, John Smith. He was always probably going to be the first. Yeah. He was a nice guy. His grave is in Iona. It overlooks, it's a beautiful place. But when I got back to the bed and breakfast, I was telling the landlady, says, we're across, and he says, but some Americans were here a couple of weeks ago, and they went to Iona, and they came back and says, what a boring place that is.
What are you looking for?
What do you expect?
My youngest lad just did the whiskey tour.
Right. Wow.
So, yeah, brilliant.
A true story. There's a Wallace monument, obviously linked to William Wallace, and somebody decided after the terrible Braveheart film, somebody actually put out, they built a statue of, it's not William Wallace, it's Mel Gibson. But I was there about 10 years ago, and I kid you not, there was 2 American tourists came down and they went, gee, you thought they could have put an elevator in this? This thing is like 500 years old and they want an elevator put into it.
We'll put it on the outside, don't worry. Yeah.
Anyway, back to games, Andy. So, did you when you were programming games, did you program them directly onto like the host machine, or did you use another machine and then upload it, or you didn't upload it? I don't know what you'd call it, transfer it or something.
Yeah, we did both. All the early stuff was written on the machine itself, and later when we'd made a bit of money, we bought some Sage 4 heavy processing, so we could all work on the same stuff and share files in a much more modern way. But the early stuff was written on the hardware itself. Yeah, definitely.
Straight onto it. Yeah.
And all of the music was done that way, and all of the graphics from Andy Rickson. We wrote like sprite editors and things, but they ran on a 64. So what you see is what you get, sort of thing. Yeah, and Rare, the Stamper Boys didn't do that at all. They did all of their work on squared paper.
Sorry.
And just really hard work. But in the end, you had to imagine that those pixels wouldn't be quite as sharp as the squared paper, so it would look a little different. I just thought that was a bit strange. Yeah, do it on what you see and just move that one across a bit, give it a bit of separation. Look,
Yeah. Didn't do them any harm right enough, did it?
Huh?
I'm saying it didn't do them any harm. Some of the games that they put out.
Did not, did it? Wouldn't mind being a quid behind them. Yeah.
So most of the Taskset games, they were very, very much arcade games. You know, and they obviously played to the strengths of the C64. Do you agree with that? I mean, did the C64 really lend itself to the type of game that you guys wanted to put out?
Yeah, spot on. Absolutely that. I think when we were first releasing stuff for the home market, the games didn't have high score tables because nobody had a player 1, player 2 swap. So we brought that feel to it, but the games themselves we knew what we could start to do with the VIC chip. And it was such a revelation. It was so different from Spectrum, which was really just a memory array and had genuine sprites. I was used to hardware sprites from the coin-op world, and there they were again. So yeah, everybody was thinking we need to dip our bread in this quickly and get there to the market. And yeah, what a market. You just put stuff out there and people would send you money in the form of a postal order, send you money in the post, and you'd stick the labels on the side of the cassettes in the kitchen and send them back same day if you could. And that was it. There was nobody else involved. Yeah, magic.
Brilliant. So how would you personally rate the C64 over like the Spectrum, the Atari, etc.? Because the Atari had the same processor, didn't it, as the C64? Eh?
Yeah, it did. And you could tell that I still believe that it was Atari engineers that made the Commodore 64. And it was a commercial issue to make it Commodore. Was it Jack Tramiel that bought it out?
Yeah.
But underneath it, you could see everything was written in the Atari technical language. And you could see it in the way that went on to do the Amiga too, yeah? And that again, it was Commodore tried to market that as a business machine, for goodness sake, with a word processor and a spreadsheet on it. But the technical manual on it described play fields, not backgrounds or wallpaper. They were called play fields from the word go. And the Atari engineers were, instrumental, weren't they? They laid the ground rules and formed the whole basis of hardware for the home computing.
Yeah, I mean, I always think Atari were ahead of the 8-ball. You know, they were. I mean, I think the Atari 800, it came out in something like 1978 or something, and you know, all the early games that I enjoyed playing in the C64, a lot of like the American stuff like Fort Apocalypse and Blue Max, when you play them on the Atari, they're phenomenal. I mean, the Atari, to me, it was a shame it never really quite took off in the UK, and I think because a lot of the games in America, I think most people had disk drives, whereas you know they're probably too expensive in the UK. So, and the Atari, I mean, the tape was literally that. It was literally 20 minutes to load a game. It was complete ball aching, and it never really, it kind of died. But the Atari was the very, very first computer that I ever saw. I saw Bruce Lee and I saw Summer Games, and I was just like, wow, I want some of this.
It sparkled, didn't it? That was the difference. It actually sparkled. Yeah, I loved it. It was obviously capable hardware, and the marketing wasn't right somehow. Yeah. It didn't work for UK.
Yeah. Did you guys put out any Atari games at all?
Started one with a couple of lads from York Uni, and it never really got off the ground. And I think that was probably true. We were trying to do experimental stuff before the internet remotely, and it was just pants. Nothing of it was marketable. And it was interesting. It was extremely colourful, but it was some of Jeff Minter's experimental stuff. Well, this was nothing like as good, but ever so colourful.
Yeah, I think Jeff Minter said that Psychedelia, which was his light synth, I can't even say it, never mind play it, light synthesizer. That was the Atari one was the best because it had the most shades and that kind of thing. I think it was. Yeah, brilliant. Listen, what I'm going to do now, Andy, is I'm just going to. I've got a little. I did put out. I've got a feature on my channel called "They Did What," and it's basically I take a software company and I show the adverts and I talk about the company and then I look at the games and all that. And I think Taskset were probably one of the first ones that I did. So I've kind of butchered that a wee bit. So I'm just going to have this kind of playing in the background. Just bear with me. Share a video file. We go Taskset. Open that. There we go. Right, I've deliberately bonus point. Quick, what's the game?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Oh God, it's Bozo.
There you go. So most of the Taskset games were quintessentially British. Such things. I mean, traditional pastimes like going to the beach, seaside special, staggering home drunk from the pub. Then there was also Poster Pastor. And obviously fixing pipes and Super Pipeline. Were any of these games based on real life experiences, especially walking home from the pub drunk?
Well, Taskset had an address in High Street in Brid. High Street is very old, really, really old. But it also had 14 pubs on it.
Wow.
The Star, the Pack, the Nags, the Old George, and so on down the Queen's and the Board and the Old Ship. And it was unnatural. You could have a pub crawl without leaving the street. We didn't always. I mean, we really, really honestly didn't. But when we did, it was a giggle. It really didn't happen. We put it on the answer phone, on the answer machine. It was a high-tech communication piece of gear. You're through to Taskset, but it's Friday and we're all down the pub. That was it.
So were any of these characters based on real life people, especially that was like a woman with no clothes on, or was it just a light coloured dress or something? I'm not quite sure.
Summer's quite short in the east coast of Yorkshire. But if you mix 22 degrees on an evening and half a dozen pubs further down, then it's just going to happen, isn't it?
Awesome.
No specific person. You can't point the finger and say that's Alice or no.
But I love the fact that it's just again it's quintessentially British 1980s. Some of the stuff that's going on there. Awesome.
Yeah,
and it's even nodding, tipping the hat to like the terrible pavements with potholes and what have you. Which you'll probably know a lot about in your present job. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that one.
So, I mean, I've been playing video games since basically Space Invaders from 1979, I think it was. And I mentioned before we kind of started, I can honestly say that the Super Pipeline games are two of my, I say, not just C64 games, but my favourite ever video games. Now, I love talking about, I mean, my channel is primarily talking about, I don't really play many games. I just like talking about them, and I love reminiscing and the whole sort of scene back then. But when I play, and I upset a few people recently, I said that 95% of 8-bit games I won't play for any more than about 30 seconds. And that's true. Not to say that they weren't good games, and probably still are good games, but that's me. But Super Pipeline, I mean, I do a live stream every Sunday, and I don't need any excuses at all to load up Super Pipeline. I just think they're just absolutely fantastic. Really,
so much fun with the pipe kit, getting it all together. but it started as a coin-op.
Well, that I
Never-
was actually going to. What I was going. Sorry, interrupting you, Randy. What I was going to say was, yeah, I mean, Super Pipeline to me is one of the few kind of, maybe some of Jeff Minter's games like Grid Runner or whatever, but I suppose they were technically based on sort of Tempest, whatever, but or Centipede. But Super Pipeline, it's got arcade game written all over it, and it really has. I would kill to have that in an arcade machine. You know, it is. It's you press play and boom, you're away. You're into the game right away.
Yeah, it very nearly was. We wrote it on Xylec hardware, so the Stamper Boys were on the hardware, but the game itself was it was the other aspect. It wasn't landscape; it was portrait for the arcades at the time, and it was difficult somehow. The plumber and his mates had sort of, he only had one mate in those days.
Yeah, the first one,
Yeah, the first plumber came out of, we were programming in the back room there. Tony Gibson's Intertech Superbrain machine by then were really big spenders. But immediately above it, in part of the rest of the house, was Arts Cosmic Convoy. There was a wee leak in the central heating system, and it dripped through the ceiling and just missed one of the most expensive development computers we'd ever bought. I missed it by a fraction, and my dad turned up to fix it, and that was fine because he turned up in his little plumber's coat, on his bag of plumbing tools, and that was it. That it was born at that stage. Yeah.
So does that? I don't even, considering how much a favourite game it is, I don't even. What's the name of the guy? What's the name of the sort of the main gaffer? What's he called?
Foreman Fred. Yeah.
Fred, is it Fred? Is that based on your dad then? Yeah.
No, no, he was Cyril.
he was the wee apprentice.
Foreman Fred just worked, but it wasn't till it transferred to the home industry. And he brought it back out of the ideas bag and said, "This is what we want to do." And the first Pipeline, I think Pipeline 2 is my favorite game that I've been involved with ever.
Yeah.
It just had everything sort of came together much better. But the first one was still a good game. It's still
well, I'll be honest. I'm utterly stumped as to whether I prefer the first one or the second one. I think I would probably have to go for the second one. I think the graphics were tidied up a wee bit.
Yeah, more polished, didn't it?
Yeah. But one of the big things for me, the thing is, I love the first one as well. I love, the music is just absolutely awesome. But the bit that really, really seals it for me with the second one is, I just think these little comical outros are just brilliant. I mean, it's the only time I've played a computer game. I mean, nowadays you PlayStation 4 and it's all real, it's all boring. But that, playing an 8-bit game, even now, when you get the two wee guys walking across, and then the buxom blonde walks and they turn and then follow them. I can't stop laughing. I mean, it still cracks me up even now. And I think for you to actually have captured making people laugh,
honestly, it was the boys.
Brilliant. It was
Mark
brilliant.
Programmed it. Paul Hodgson put him up to it, and Andy Rickson did the graphics. And they popped the first one of those series in without telling me, without specifically hiding it from me. And but essentially we all worked together, so it wasn't very long before you could see it. But they'd cooked it up between them as a giggle, and we just fell about on the floor laughing.
Well,
with that, Andy Rickson had got Anne, our secretary, by then digitized.
So that is Anne that walks from left to right or right to left.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what the first one. I think you only get the wee intro every 3 levels, so you've got to work a lot harder. Whereas the second one, you get it every level. Yeah. How many intros or not? How many comical bits are there?
Honestly, I don't know. I've slept since then. Gosh, and there will be some in the bin, definitely. There was stuff that never made it, and same in every development company.
And
the idea side was never quite empty, but anything all the way through. Well, you can tell it if it's not a laugh, we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, and there's also the little tip in your hat to sort of like the anti-spectrum when the little apprentice, the guy comes on in the is it Monty Mole or something that's in the C5 and he just hits it with a hammer.
Bosh.
That must upset. Did you keep that in for the Spectrum version, by the way?
We should have done what we should have done if we were a properly organized business, hard-nosed company. We'd have done the same game better again, different title, different hardware. We'd have made the most out of our marketing, but we wanted to try something else instead. And we even wrote an adventure game at one stage.
You did, Souls of Darkon, yeah. And there's
Yeah.
another one that I've featured in this. I don't know if that's Souls of Darkon actually, but one of the, I mean, apart from the always cartoon graphics, fast gameplay, you know, the music to me, for especially the Pipeline games, was just absolutely sublime. And what I find odd about the music is each of the little tunes are about 10 seconds in length. They're the most irritating little tunes ever, but they're so catchy. And I couldn't imagine. And that is, I did I looked at the Spectrum one, Amstrad one, and I think, take the music away and you've lost half the game. I mean, was it Paul? What's the guy that?
Yeah, Paul Hodgson. Yeah,
he did the music for them, and a lot of them they were like, I mean, I think it's at the South Bank show that's in there. A lot of the wee tunes, you go, I know that tune. I don't know how I know it, but you just do.
Because he understood the theory of music. He was just really, really clever, very accomplished on keyboard as well. But bringing that and the way that the music should have been looped, the way that intros ought to work, he understood, and it just shines through, doesn't it?
It just it really you couldn't you take the music out, and I think you would lose a lot of the appeal of the game. Just sublime.
We went off with Cosmic Convoy, which was our first ever C64 game, and that had, I think, the first interrupt-driven sound available in UK. I think that wrote all of the interrupt-driven timing routines for the tempo of everything and set everything around that. And the whole of the rest of the game was built around the metronome for the sound, just to see if we could do it, and then made it into a game and sold it. But what you're showing on the screen now is jamming.
That's a bizarre game. That I remember buying that from Boots, actually.
Yeah. And again, Tony Gibson all the way through. He knew what he wanted, but Paul did most of the sound for it. And it's basically a sound game. But the game is unlike everything else. It's totally unique. And Bob Marley was a god at the time. And you can tell.
And of course, you build up, you collect the different instruments and take them to the right. When I was playing it for this video, I couldn't actually remember what I was to do again. It'd been that long since I'd played this particular game. But you build up the instruments and you build up the music to kind of a decent tune, don't you?
Yeah, you build up the tracks and overlay them, and away they go. Yeah.
Am I right in thinking, Andy, that this game was programmed by Tony Gibson, who I think you believe he sadly passed away in 2013?
He did. Yeah. The late great Tony Gibson. This was his idea from the word go, and all of the graphics he did, and he did the first cut of the sound. Paul Hodgson did the final cut of the sound, but it was the uniqueness, the chain of thought of how to build music and build that into a simple, additional game with baddies as well. Bum notes.
So, was there any recreational substances involved in this game's development at all?
You might think that. I couldn't possibly comment. Yeah.
Moving swiftly on, Cad Cam Warrior. That was, I remember buying that in Glasgow, and if I remember rightly, it came in quite a big, kind of ultimate play the game size kind of box. And I think it was hugely expensive at £9.99, I think it was. But it had a lot of screens, and that was yourself that programmed that one, wasn't it?
Well, everybody did some of everything. I don't think any of the games were solely one person. It wasn't really how Taskset worked. People would chuck things in. People would. We'd written our own libraries by then, obviously, to get the graphics and sound to work together. And so an awful lot was carried forward. But that wasn't really the interesting. That is not why anybody came to work at Taskset. They came to work to write the game control, because if it didn't react fast enough to the joystick, you would put it in the bin. No one's going to play that. It could be really good, really fine graphics, terrific stuff, but if it didn't react fast enough, instantly, then it was no good. And the more that you sat there and played it, the more you would realize that there was something wrong with this, and it was hard to put your finger on. But if it wasn't dead right, it just needed redoing. And sometimes that really did mean going back and counting the machine cycles. Saying, these routines are taking too long. This is the one that's slowing it down. This is called repeatedly. Hone that one, get it fast. But as soon as you did that, and it sounded like a bit of a drudge, but it wasn't. It was such an achievement when you did it and you ran it and you pressed fire and it went and you hit him and you got it. And it was the interreaction. It's the screen with the people. Right, what we first started to talk about tonight, about how things work and what makes a good game. It's when it reacts and it does your bidding.
You can certainly see that you guys came from an arcade pedigree or background, because a game like that wouldn't have sold if it didn't react quickly, and that's I think that's why all your games would have absolutely fitted on an arcade machine. They really would have.
Yeah, it was the speed of everything, because we were asking the processors to do quite a lot. Looking back on it, again, it was quite naive that we expected to be able to do all of that in 40K. And you don't get much in 40K.
It's like the old analogy you hear of people saying, like, a game like this, Poster Pastor, which you can see I completely can't play. I never did actually own that one, but I mean, there was more. Probably the Twitter icon is going to be probably double the memory that you had for one of these games, and that is phenomenal. Yeah. So Cad Cam Warrior, then, getting back to that, it had a it was one of the first games, I think. It came out. This was way before Andrew, what's he called? Andrew Braybrook did Uridium and Paradroid. It had a very distinctive kind of bas relief kind of look, and that was. How did that kind of what prompted the idea behind the game? How did you kind of come up with ideas for games?
It was the ideas for games would happen just when you weren't expecting them, really. Usually at a really inconvenient moment when you're trying to get the latest one finished, and if you suddenly think of an idea that people say, yeah, that'll work. Yeah, we could do this. Look, we could do that. Then you're never going to finish the other one. You've got to put it in a bag and say, yeah, we'll get to that. And that's where some of them got lost forever, with the Chevy shuttle and all sorts of bits and pieces. Never made it. But when you bring them back and you make them work, it's actually a bit like proper grown-up business, that you've actually got a plan. And you say, we're going to do this, and this one you're showing now, Seaside Special, that broke all of those rules. Tony again. Obviously super political. We fell out badly over this game. We really did. And that was different. Still a good game, and a giggle. Definitely a giggle. But Rottaway Beach is where he's at, isn't it?
Is that based on the Bridlington Beach, by any chance?
No,
Not Navajo, obviously, but yeah.
Definitely Sellafield. Yeah.
Awesome. So how many at the peak did how many people actually work for Taskset?
I should know that. There were 3 in the office, 4 of us upstairs, a couple of guys trying to work. We're trying to get that going in York, so I don't know, we're probably around 10, but 8 active. The heart of it remained Mark and Paul, Andy, Rickson, and Tony, and I would do the real games, and the others had to tolerate us, really.
Mm-hmm. So quite a small little team. I mean, you didn't actually put out that many games, really, did you?
No, the time was moving on.
Yeah.
I should have been better at business, but I wasn't really terribly interested in that. Yeah.
You kind of touched on about the selling games at the old computer fairs. So did you before you could start selling games in what'd you call it, in like shops? Did you go to all like the PCW shows and all the sort of like the computer fairs and things like that? Yeah.
Yeah. First met Jeff Minter at one of those with Kim Wilde, I think. Yeah, she turned up at the same.
Kim Wilde was there as well.
Yeah.
Blimey.
Yeah. And it was just a tabletop, and you just took stuff and sold it, because you always sold out. Never brought anything home, ever.
The thing that people probably, I mean, some there's a lot of pretty awful games that probably sold quite a lot back in the day. Imagine Software. But anyway, yeah, the thing is, back in, any kids that are watching this, it's hard to you basically had to have been there back in 1983 when I first got my what do you call it, my C64. You would have bought anything at all. Oh, there's a computer game, it's got a picture of Space Invaders, I'm going to buy it.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter how bad it was. Well, it did. You think, well, that's crap, and you just, that was it. But you couldn't have got enough games. And then obviously things started to grow. It became people, I think, was it Mel Croucher in Bedrooms to Billions? He said that things changed when the businessmen got involved, and it became about money, and that's when probably smaller companies like Taskset kind of couldn't compete, possibly. Was that be?
Absolutely. It changed. We were wholesaling things, and some of the larger chains ran their own. They ran their own charts. The Boots chart was probably the most influential, and what Boots had bought most of tended to be in the top 4. And then after that, it was what the public bought. But it was what Boots bought first that decided that chart.
Yeah.
There were no rules. One guy in a different company from Boots, he said, thinking of the litigation to follow, said, yeah, we'll take 500 of these a week, but I need a Mediterranean holiday. And you just think, that's not
really
what we're doing. That is not what we're doing here.
Yeah, forget it.
Wholesalers were involved, duplication houses. The place in Telford that used to be Decca used to make our tables.
Yeah.
Then they'd do stuff in the boxes for us, and we ended up doing less and less of that, which sounds good because you actually want to be writing stuff, but it really took the soul out of it, because you were disconnected. I said earlier that people would send you money, and the missus would be duplicating tapes, and we'd be sticking the labels on an evening, and you'd send it back. If you missed the post, then it'll have to be next day. But that was really unusual for us, and we could build a little Taskset club out of that. Just a tear off strip from the inside of the cassette cover, post it back to us, and we'll give you 10% off your next game. Because it was them and us, that I agree completely. It just changed, and it lost it lost its soul, really. I thought we
no,
were not well equipped at Taskset, because we should have had somebody who understood marketing. I employed a guy called Andy Nutter, to do marketing for us, because I knew nothing about it, but I didn't understand business, and neither did he. So we employed an accountant, and he didn't really understand games one way or another. He just didn't know which way up they went. And so it was not well prepared. I should have sorted the business out better. I should have concentrated on making money and issuing invoices instead of that you're looking at there. How fast does the first plumber catch up Foreman Fred? And how much of a buffer do you need between him till it looks right?
I was just the screen previously. I did a video, top 10 computer villains, and I think the Lobster was. I think he was high up. I think he was in the top 3. He's an absolute fiendish sod. Yeah, you can basically only shoot him up the backside.
Oh, you can, yeah, absolutely. Well,
dun. And I think that was, again, going back to the arcades, you had the dun dun dun, and you knew that was it. That was an alert. That was an audio alert to here he comes. Yeah.
It's just
I'm actually sitting humming the tune, even though we're talking. I can just hear it. And then here we go. This is the second one. So the graphics were a bit kind of even. I think the water was flowing slightly kind of smoother looking. Was it?
Yeah. It's all. Everything was more polished, wasn't it? But you knew what you had to do, didn't you? You didn't really need much of an instruction book.
No.
And it's simple. It's cartoon. It works. But the relationship between the foreman and the workers was so important, and it's the way they moved. The worst of all, I'm not sure why. I can't remember why now. Was going from right to left and then up a vertical, and that took ages before we got the bugs out of that. The number of 1-bit shifts that were going wrong and the calculations were, gosh, that was blood, sweat, and tears on that.
And I mean, even playing this game, you would be like, "Come on, wait, get over here!" And then he would be fixing it, and then suddenly a flea would drop. God's sake! And then he would run along the bottom like that and get chased with. It was like Benny Hill. I mean, I'm surprised you never actually had Benny Hill and theme tune in it. It would have been brilliant.
But that was the level of humour, wasn't it? It was not complex in any way. It was just what you see.
Awesome.
What you get.
And it's like if you get the sweet spot in the level and you just keep shooting things, it can be really easy. But then once it goes, it's like spinning plates. You're back and forwards, and then. Yeah. And the wee guys are falling, and come here, and he's up the top, and you're running back.
Can you recover it? Can you get back from that? No.
So, but the magazines then, Andy, obviously you were probably aware of, like, they had computer and video games. You had Zap 64. I mean, I think Zap to me was the definitive magazine for the C64, and I think I mean I'm actually good friends with Gary Liddon, who was one of the original program. One of the original, reviewers, and Gary's admitted that we knew full well that if we gave a game a bad review that it was going to not sell. And he says, but we didn't care because we were 18 years old and we thought they were great, and you couldn't buy them. Did you have much? Did you have much of a kind of like a relationship with the magazines, and more particularly Zap?
Yeah, I loved Zap. It was glossy and it was right there on its time. I think it was the first time that young reviewers were really given the space. Before that, it was like, I don't mean lecturers, but nearly lecturers.
Fuddy-duddies, aye.
Yeah, they were ever so worthy, but Zap really did it. It gave them their head and said, "Get on, just tell it like 2 stars. Are you sure that's all you get?" Oh, what? And I don't know. We didn't. I don't think we ever cultivated it. We wrote it, we played it, we got the bugs out of it, we published it, and be damned. That's what we're doing. There you go. Off you go. We always thought it was the right time to publish when we did, with the single exception of Seaside Special that was late.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, it's ready to go. So go to the duplicating house and master it. That was it. Go and do it now. And you put everything on the line at that stage. But there was never a time in which I thought that we released a duffer, because it was the time. It wasn't a release schedule. We had to have one on May the 1st or something. Didn't happen. It would go when it's ready. And I would have liked it to go on this day, but if it's not ready, it's not going, and that's it. And then get it out as early as you can to the magazines.
Mm-hmm.
Zap, I thought, was truly great because it actually looked like a C64 graphic, even though it was much more polished than that, obviously. But you could see it as its presentation was spot on.
Mm-hmm.
The reviews were generally exactly what you would think of the game yourself.
Yeah, the thing as a consumer, the Zap 64 was the Bible, and whatever Julian Rignall or Gary Penn or Gary Liddon said, that was the game. Whoa, I was in there, and very, very rarely bought a game that they recommended, and I was disappointed. Just a very quick one, go back a wee bit. Given the Taskset's kind of arcade heritage, I was surprised, apart from Gyropod, you never actually put out like a full-on shoot-'em-up. Though, I mean, technically you could say Pipeline is kind of a shoot-'em-up of sorts. Was there a reason you never actually put out a full-on vertical scrolling or sort of whatever?
We did try a couple. Trying to think. It was off the back of Hunter, really, off of the Coin-Op times, which was a straight downward view of four-way scroller. But I don't know why it didn't happen. We should have made more of Andromeda than we did. We should have converted that for the home market. Cosmic Convoy was not that, but we should have also done our version of Defender, I think. But I was still in awe of that. And Robotron, again, the rate of fire that you can get on Robotron is just awesome. It's just that much lead in the air. You think?
I always think. I mean, I think probably Robotron to me, it's the most. It's just the most sort of like how do I describe it? It's the most pure. It's the purest video game you could ever get. Move, fire. That is it. There's nothing. You die, it's your own fault.
I knew that. I saw it. Yeah. So I'm still dead.
So did you have a lot of contact? I mean, you touched on obviously computer shows, and I'm assuming that would be the only time when you'd come in contact with other companies. Were you kind of aware of like your Oceans and your Elites and Gremlin Graphics and all these kind of companies?
Yeah, Tony, wasn't it, from Gremlin? But he was a good lad. Liked him, and of course the Yak. The shows were a time to try and meet up with Jeff again. We never did spend enough time in a pub. Outside of the show surroundings, where you can just chew the fat. But Oceans were,
they were a business,
really Manchester business, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
really. Software Projects, that was a bit different. Cheeky Scousers involved there. Bit less polished on the business front, but again, some great titles.
Yeah, I was. I wouldn't say I know Jeff that well, but I've met him quite a few times. I joined his Lamasoft forum back in 1999, I think it was, and the very first time I was down in one of my mates, Mark Racing, he started up a thing called Retrovision, and it was a group of us. We went down to a pub in Botley in Oxford, and we took along machines. I flew down to go to this thing. And it was just a group of people. There was a couple of guys who had brought along arcade machines. And it was the first time I'd played a Commodore 64 in like 30 years. And basically, Retrovision became what has now become. You've got Rewind, you've got the play events, and all these. But this was just like, it was all just for fun. And I was down there in 2003, 4, and I knew that Jeff Minter was going to be there, and I was standing in the pub with my pint, nursing my pint, and in walked Jeff Minter, and I was just like, and he had a big shaggy kind of long jacket on. He didn't disappoint, and he was at the bar, and I kind of summoned up the courage to go up and stand beside him, and I said, "Hey Jeff, how you doing?" He went, "Oh, how you doing, man?" And I'm Main Meister. "Oh yeah, how you doing, man?" I'm good. And I said, "So how's Unity coming?" The Unity was a game that he was writing for the GameCube. He was working with Peter Molyneux. It was going to be with, I think, was it Bullfrog? I think it was, or Lionhead. Lionhead, I think they're called. That was Peter Molyneux's next thing. Right. And it basically became, it was a light visualizer. You know, you could control it. It was like psychedelic, but you could control it, whatever. And sadly, it never actually got released. But I said to how's Unity coming? Oh, wait a minute. And he went into this kind of man bag thing, and he brought out this little DVD player, and he put this DVD on, and he was standing beside me, and he was kind of sort of dancing. He was just going, "Oh man, yeah," and he was dancing as he was watching. I just thought, this is so cool. Here's a guy here. This is the legendary Jeff Minter, and he's
him. What you see is what you get, isn't it?
And he's showing me this game, and I'm like, wow. You know, just, and are you aware of Sean Southern? He wrote Kickstart. He was Mr. Chip Software.
Oh yeah, Mr. Chip. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I ever met him, did I?
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to Sean and Andrew Morris, who did the graphics. They went on to, they did Kickstart, which were budget games, brilliant. They then went on to the Amiga, and they did the Lotus Turbo Challenge, which is basically Outrun for the Amiga. Phenomenal games. Right. And so I got in touch with Sean, just as I did with yourself, Andy, and I was lucky enough to interview them for my channel, and then I got to interview them at Blackpool, and I got to kind of hang out with them afterwards, and it's quite funny, because when I was talking to Sean, I says, "Do you remember that game?" He went, "No, I can't remember anything about that." I went, and he actually couldn't remember. I was showing him games that he'd written, and he went, "I don't remember that." And then I said to him, when did you last play that game? He went, "I've not played that for 30 years. I says, "Tell you what, I'll send you a zip file of an emulator with all your games in it," which I obviously own, and I had to explain to him how to load the emulator up and all that. But brilliant, you know. And it's things. I'm an old fart. I'm not. I've got an ancient phone. I'm not into my phones. I'm on Facebook just because I have to. But and I'm not. You know, as much as I would gladly get rid of mobile phones and all that, the fact that I can sit and talk to somebody like yourself, who wrote one of the best video games ever written, without the internet, this wouldn't be possible. And I'd love to think that one day you and I'll get together in a pub, and I'll buy you a pint, and we'll play some video games. This thing is just not possible without the internet, and I think it's brilliant.
Okay, the technology we're on is fine, and you wouldn't have been able to afford it 20 years ago.
Yeah,
30 years, but it's actually more than that, isn't it? It's actually more than 30 years ago. That's the same. It's so long ago.
Probably nearer 50. Aye.
Yeah, and the time, everything was different. You can see that the humor was a bit different, but it's the way that I think the bit I'm most pleased with is that we were a British house that made some money in Miami on coin-op, but we actually giggled about it in England, and the Britishness of Taskset, I think, is still there. So it's what we did at the time. It wouldn't wash now, and it's not meant to do, is it? It's the wrong time.
There were games of our time, and I think, even like people, I was a C64 man, and I used to think, oh, the Spectrum was rubbish. I now own I've got a Spectrum Next, and I've been playing Spectrum games for quite a long time, and I think the Spectrum is phenomenal. It's a you cannot say, oh, you can't compare them. They're both complete. It's like saying I love apples, so I can't like bananas as well. The Spectrum was an awesome wee machine, and the fact it was so British, the fact that you got games like Trashman and Manic Miner and Monty Mole, they were brilliant.
Yeah. But again, you're looking at the people behind them, aren't you? That was the technology. That's instead of a pen and ink, you're putting it on a bitmap screen, and you're using nothing but pop routines, pop instructions to build the screen fast enough, because it's the fastest instruction that a Z80 can do. You pop the whole screen off into another area so that you could build the smooth animation. But it was the technicalness of things like Night Law, completely awesome for the Spectrum. That whole game, I was amazed. It was so Spectrum that it wouldn't have been right anywhere else. It worked there. It wouldn't work anywhere else, and it wouldn't work in a different time. So they were spot on. It's technical brilliance, but it was playable as well, and ultimately playable.
I think was that a guy, Steve Waheed. I think he worked for Imagine. He was on again Bedrooms to Billions, and he said what was awesome about the Spectrum was, unlike the Atari or the Commodore 64, they had sort of boundaries. You've got sprites, you've got this, you've got that, whatever. The Spectrum was just, I think you touched on it, it's just basically memory, a keyboard, and a little buzzer for it. And it was just like, there you go. It's like handing somebody a pen and a piece of paper. There you go. And it was just like there was no limits to the Spectrum, because there was, you can't have, it was just pushing it constantly. And like I said, some of the games that are coming out now are just wow. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. But then somebody putting in a huge number of hours, aren't they? Somebody is still doing that on a huge number of hours. I'm so pleased that they are, but I'm also pleased it's not me. Where do they get it from? Where do they find that much time?
Now you touched on you're talking about Andy Rickson. Now when I was doing a wee check in Wikipedia, let me have a wee look. Share the screen. There was oh wait a minute. Hang on a second. Share video file. Where is it? I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll just open up the screen, and then hang on. Why is that size? There we go. Right, I'll just share my screen. This game, share screen. There we go. Share audio. Bink. This was apparently an unreleased game. These are graphics by Andy Rickson. Do you know anything about that at all? What was the game?
Isn't it? That's an absolute conveyor. What the hell are we doing there? We're definitely building stacks, but I can't remember why. Again, when you build graphic utilities that allow talented artists to experiment, you get some great things. But I can't remember. Gosh, man!
There was no name. There was no name attached to it. Was that in the C64? It kind of looks Commodore 64ish, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, in fact, it is.
You can see the electricity kind of going along here as well. Can I make that bigger? Oh no, sorry, I've just made it smaller. That was silly.
Again, Andy would know. There you go. Andy would know. Looks as if Paul Hodgson was involved in there as well. You can see a poster paster-esque bit in there. Yeah. No, I don't know. Sorry, I've forgotten.
So that never actually came to. It was never released as a game. I take it though.
Never did.
Oh, I better hide that from you. You don't see the questions. So what would you have said? I mean, I suppose successful. If you're going to say, the game that's made you the most money, what was the best selling game that you guys released?
I think it was Pipeline 2 for Taskset. Yeah, The Pit for Coin-Op and Pipeline 2 for Commodore, and Digger T Rock for Nintendo.
What was that called? Sorry,
that was Digger T Rock and the Legend of the Lost City.
I'll need to write. I'll be watching this back again. I'll need to write. I want to go and check out all these other games, Andromeda, that you mentioned as well. So
yeah, they are somewhere, but I'll be honest. Yeah, I don't delve into them anymore. It was then. Nobody's got any time now.
So what was it? What was the last ever 8-bit game that was released? Was it Pipeline 2 or was it Souls of Darkon, which I think they both came out in, was it 84? Was it 84?
Could have done.
I
I'll be
think it was
honest, I don't know. Pipeline 2 was the game that we wanted out there the most. Seaside Special wasn't far away from that in timing. It was late. It was due out probably, I can't remember, probably a year before it actually.
Because what I'll do is I'll add that there. I don't know if you can see that. This is a wonderful thing called GameBase. You can see there, yeah, there's all the games. Souls of Darkon was 85. Bozo's Night Out was 84. Jammin' was 83. Poster Paster 84. Seaside Special 84. Super Pipeline was 83. Super Pipeline 2 was 85. Cosmic Causeway was 83. Cad Cam Warrior was 84. Gyropod 84. Pipeline. Oh, that's that is it. So it's quite a small number of games. So looking at that, 85 was Super Pipeline 2 and Souls of Darkon.
Yeah, I think it was Darkon. That was different. Paul was working away on that. Everybody was putting input into it, but it was coming out across lots of titles. It was Amstrad originally, believe it or not. It was
really,
actually, yeah.
What's Super Pipeline 2?
No, sorry, Souls of Darkon.
Oh, right. So it came out in the Amstrad first, and then it got,
Yeah. But we were also doing some contract stuff at the time for people like, can't remember, retail chains that wanted window displays because they did. Smiths wanted some stuff. Really non-gamey stuff. They come along and say, well, do you want to do this? It'll pay everybody's wages for 6 months. Yeah, all right. We'll do that. Didn't enjoy it at all. It was wrong.
So after, I mean, I think 1985 seemed to be the last year that Taskset kind of put out games. What happened, and what was there ever? I mean, presumably, 1985 that was still fairly early. I mean, the Amiga and the ST didn't really become something until about 87. So what happened? Why did the games kind of dry up?
It was the business wasn't right. We talked earlier about when the soul dropped out of it, and you could see it happening. That the wholesalers and the large retailers, people like Boots and Smiths, would tell you how much they were going to pay you for the next game. That's not how we worked. So it became really difficult for us, and as soon as you start to resent the people that you're selling to, then you're in the wrong show, aren't you?
Aye.
It fell apart.
And was it a conscious decision just to say, right, lads, we've had a great time, we now need to go and get real jobs?
Oh, yeah, the idea of getting a real job was really awful. But again, everybody from Taskset knew what they were doing and could get contract work. But the business of Taskset itself fell apart from an accounting point of view. It wasn't covering its expenses, which weren't much. We didn't have huge flash cars, except Andy Nutter, the marketing guy. We got him a really, really spanky Nissan Sport. Which he wrapped up. But there you go. It was fun. When it stopped being fun, it started to disintegrate. We were in the wrong spot. Didn't make enough money.
Yeah. So, do you have any regrets about? Do you think, to go back in time, I would have got an accountant and we would have, brought in marketing people, or are you glad? Would you have changed? Would you change if you could go back to 1983? Would you change anything?
that's really tough, because you're tempted to say, yeah, I'd have kept it going because I'd have gone to business class or something like that and learned how to run businesses. But to be honest, that would have wrecked it as well, wouldn't it? So we probably did what we did, and we
got out.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Again, Jeff Minter's he's mentioned that. I mean, Jeff still he's got Giles as as his kind of programming partner.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeff has always maintained he'll never be a millionaire. I mean, Jeff went to work for Atari for a while, and I don't think Jeff's one of these guys. He likes to just do his own thing. He'll put a game out when it's ready, and I get the feeling you guys are like that as well. And you weren't willing to then be taken over and be told, right, you've got 6 months to write this game. This is how it's got to look, and blah 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 blah. You guys. I mean, you guys were effectively hobbyists getting into this thing and realizing, wait a minute, we can make a few quid here, and. Yeah, you were maybe shit at accounting, etc., which is probably why things dried up. But yeah, you were in it for the right reasons, and
Oh, there isn't any doubt that the business could have been structured differently, but none of us at Taskset wanted to do the business side. Sometimes in companies you find that people, they go to their strengths and they find themselves doing other stuff. Chris Stamper was never into the business or accounting side at Ultimate, but his brother was much more into management, as well as being really talented in graphics. But presentation was the thing, and it was that move from presentation into marketing and the way that everything should look and feel. But at Taskset, nobody wanted to get interested at all in the business side. Nobody really had the time. From
a sort of a gamer's point of view, I think that's awesome because you were like a rock band that you just wanted to make music, and you weren't really interested you were interested in the money. That'd be silly to say that, but then when it became too commercial, you're like, we don't want to do it anymore. You disbanded the band and you went your own way.
Yeah, we did a lot of collaboration. We actually had a great meetup not a very long time ago.
Oh, did you? Awesome.
Yeah, had to be Blackpool with Paul Drury as well in the drive-in.
Oh yeah, I know Paul. Paul's a good friend of mine's actually.
He's a good lad, isn't he?
Paul's a good lad. I actually I was talking about Tony Temple, who's Missile Command world champion. Paul, Tony, and Blimey, he's going to kill me. I can't remember his second name. His name. Sorry. I'm terrible with names, but they've got they started a podcast about a year ago called the Ted Dabney Experience.
Oh yes,
and they do these absolutely wicked podcasts where they talk to people who've written all these, the classic Atari games and all that. I'm terrible with names, but they're brilliant. They're so well put together. So I had the lads on my channel about a year ago. Paul's a good lad. But
and loves 64.
He does. Yeah, I know his favourite ever video game is Sheep in Space by Jeff Minter.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
So obviously you broke the band up in 1985. The 16 bits came along, and the Atari ST and the Amiga. Was there at any point you thought, oh wait a minute, guys, we could I'll get the band back again and we'll start putting out games in the 16-bit? Was that ever a consideration?
Yeah, it sort of floated through your mind a bit. I did a lot of work with Paul Hodgson later with Amiga.
Did you really?
Yeah. Did a Road Wars game for some Melbourne house, I think, and did which I thought was my favourite Amiga game that never actually got published. Was Chevy Shuttle. It was silly. If you had a Chevy-shaped space shuttle, it was just into the power of thrust at the time. But if you really wanted to play the game easier, you'd just flown over the maze, wouldn't you? You wouldn't have needed to navigate the maze.
I suppose.
Who cares? You know, it was
Well, it's
still
a bit like
going down the corners, wasn't it?
it's a bit like Frogger. How come he drowns when he goes into the water? What's that all about?
Oh no, that can't be right. Yeah.
I mean, I've got here that the Amiga is begging for a Super Pipeline game. I mean, I'm not a fan of these remakes and all that. And you know, I think if you were able to program an Amiga version and you didn't change anything, you just kept it true to the original with the music and all that, it's probably an awesome thing, but I think I'd still go back to the original. I think there's just something about the original.
Playing it on that piece of silicon. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Still, people send me versions from time to time.
Sorry, I've never actually seen any other versions of Pipeline. I think I would be a good critic because you know, it's going to have to be pretty damn special to beat the original. I can't see that.
I can't remember what it was that the guy sent me this version on. I've also had an Apple version flow past me for it really did work on iPhone, but I haven't seen it since. And the guy said, you know, it's your game. Do you mind? I said, no, it's fun. It's good. Go and do it. You know, if you make $1 million, well, fine. Fling us a quid. I don't care. You know, but have fun.
Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, something like the PlayStation 4, etc., do you think something like Super Pipeline would work on a modern console? I mean, there's a lot of indie kind of games developers putting out these old games.
I would need a shed load of guidance because I'm not fast enough now. In fact, I haven't been fast enough for a couple of decades. I've got great grandchildren, but my grandchildren, I knew I was old when they could beat me at Crash Bandicoot. That was the measure of it. Go home, old man, at that stage. Well, little baby, for my sake, they could all beat me.
Do your grandkids, are they aware of like the fact that you used to own a software house, and have they played Pipeline?
Yeah.
What do they make it?
Not so much the granddaughters, though. My youngest grandchild is Enos. She's just got, I think she will get a Nottingham Uni place next year for graphic art for digital systems. Again, awesome stuff you wouldn't believe. Young Cameron's just back. No, he's finishing his last week, I think, at Bolton Uni on game development. So he's still in there. There's little bits of it around, and we can talk silly things about sprites and developments and things. As soon as they could get in the pub, then it's starting to get some great. The hours just disappear. It must be because I waffle on a bit, but as soon as we start talking about how can I get better DMA access to this, how can I get this to go faster on the bus, there's a couple of pints go by there.
So what do you think? Have you been to any of the sort of the gaming shows, your Play Blackpools at all? Have you done any of the talks at all? Have you? Yeah. What?
Did play Manchester once or twice because it's not just about Coin Op or C64, but also they have some great collections of pinball there. Still my love. Still get back to there and lose myself on a range. I haven't got a favorite. Haven't got a last played. I can't remember what it was, but there are so many great pinball, and the artwork makes those as well, doesn't it?
There are things to do. Yeah, it's funny. Pinball's never. Living in central Scotland, I never really got any exposure to arcades unless it was like we used to go down to Essex for a camping holiday, and we used to. I mean, I presume it must have been the M6 or probably the A1 or something back then. And my dad's lost in Cambridge, and we would go to like the services. And you know, it'd be like, are we there yet? Are we there? We've not even left Edinburgh yet. Misbehave yourself. But yeah, we'd go to the services, and I would get the odd 10 pence to have a shot of Galaxian, whatever it was. But I never ever got to try a pin. I think the first time I played pinball would probably be at Play Glasgow, about maybe 10 years ago, maybe not quite as much as that. So I've never really kind of got the pinball thing. I've got a mate who's actually he bought the Star Trek: The Next Generation, but I think it cost him like $5,000 or something for this table. He's got it in his kitchen, and it's I can see the appeal of it. But have you tried any of like the emulators? Like, is it arcade pinball and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for me it doesn't work. You've got to realise which of the solenoid flippers are the strongest ones.
Aye,
it's a really analog sort of feeling.
Yeah.
But that was where I cut my teeth in arcades. Did you ever come across Dr. Alan Meads? He runs video gaming courses of some repute down at Canterbury.
Oh, right. No, I haven't.
But he grew up at the coast round Kent in arcades, and has written whole books and theses on the communities that built up round it, and how they looked a bit seedy, but they weren't really evil.
Mm-hmm.
The really evil guys weren't there because people looked after each other. They knew each other.
That's a thing about people, again, although I didn't really get to go to them very much. I've a lot of friends who grew up in the various kind of holiday seaside resorts, Bridlington being one of them as well. And the arcades were it was something special. Yeah, you knew that when you were going into an arcade, you knew that it felt slightly dangerous. It was dark. It stunk. There was usually like it smelled of piss or whatever, and it was. But that was a whole kind of excitement. You almost felt like you were doing something that was a bit dangerous and not really acceptable. But brilliant.
Just on the edge, but it adds an edge, doesn't it?
Aye.
But also, when you're 15 and you've got some pocket money and you're in there, but you're quite good at these pinballs in the front of John Ling's arcade on the seafront there, that you can get replays. So then suddenly your whole afternoon is funded for you. People will just let you get the replays and give them to them. That's fine. So all your initial play is done. Brilliant.
I mean, Tony Temple, he first he discovered it was a cafe. It was like a greasy spoon cafe, and they got this machine called Missile Command, and he says that and it resonates with me. Back in the early 80s, as a child, I was genuinely terrified that I was going to die with a nuclear bomb because we were getting all these public information films, and if your granny dies, you need to wrap her up in a bag and you need to put her outside build shelters with mattresses and cases with sand and things like that. Where you're going to get these, I don't know, but. And he said when he was genuinely terrified, and then when this game appeared in the cafe, suddenly he could stop the nuclear war. And he said that there was all these guys that just used to watch. He was like 12 years old, and he was kicking their arse at this game, and they would all just watch him. And he says it was great. They became a real kind of community of people around this one particular arcade game. And eventually not Tony, the guy that owned the cafe, like enough's enough. You come in here at 9 o'clock in the morning, you're bloody playing till 5 o'clock at night for 10 pence. We're getting rid of it, and they got rid of it, and they brought in something else.
But what a game! Again, it wasn't like anything else, was it?
No.
Missile Command just stands there as a mark of how you can do things and involve people and plan ahead on a screen. It's just awesome.
And I think as well, and games like Missile Command, and even games like all the Taskset games, they're part of history, and it's a period that you could watch a video of ELO in the 1970s, and they've got the big flares and the hair and all that, or then you could look at a film, from, I don't know, Kess or something from the 80s or 1970s, whatever, and it's a stamp in time. It's the same video games. You load up Seaside Special or whatever it is, and it's just quintessential. Like, and you've got all the microgen games, Pajama Ramas, and everyone's a Wally. They're pure British, and they're off their time, you know. And I think that's a magical thing.
It takes you right there again.
It does. It does, and I've said that to my daughter. I says when I eventually go to the Great Arcade in the Sky, I says you've got 1,700 videos of me just talking about videos, and although I'm completely a numpty, I can't program whatever, I see myself as a historian. At the end of the day, when I'm long gone, somebody will find my videos and who's this guy he's talking to, and and this will suddenly become something that's quite feasible. I'm sure this video will be getting watched in some university course in 50 years time or whatever.
Exactly what I was going to say. It will be essential study that's what it's going to be. Definitely on the curriculum. You've got to do this. You've got to sit through this. You've got to take part in this. Get amongst it. Because honestly, it really is. Maybe it's only us two in the whole world. I don't know. But when things can take you back to a specific point in time because they were popular in that time, or somebody else thought they were popular, then that's the one that fixes how everything else hung together at the time. The films that you were watching, the music that you listened to, it's all wrapped up in that one feeling there, and you can just put it on and it takes you there.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And it's unlike, I mean, I suppose music's got the same thing. You can go back watching a film, it takes you back, but I can load up a game, Way of the Exploding Fist, and it's summer in 1985, and I just left school. I was still at school, and I was working part-time, and Pipeline and all these games, they just take me straight back to a special time when you had less responsibilities and you weren't worried. The only thing you had to concern yourself was would the tape load or not, you know. That was about
it. Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you feel about the fact that I was a complete stranger to you up until a couple of days ago? How do you feel when people contact you or you get asked by Mr. Drury to come down to Blackpool and talk about games? You're thinking that was something that I did 40 years ago. Yeah. Does it amaze you, and do you get a lot of enjoyment out of being involved in these, that people still love what you did?
I still find that amazing. It's really unusual because it doesn't happen often, but also it's not what you were doing it for. And for now, I was in the queue for drinks, I think, at Play Manchester, and some guy came up that I'd never seen before. He said, "Oh, Pipeline, that's you." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Will you sign this?" I said, "Sign it? Yeah." Yeah, it was beer mat or something, I don't know. And it's still unusual. And I don't know, nobody at Taskset thought that it would ever materialize like that. Will it ever mature into something like that? No, it's nothing like that. It's just what we're doing today.
In the present, yeah.
So it's really alien. But again, it's like I was saying about being published. There's something about it when you just walk in and you can see there isn't one on the shelf, they've got 20.
Yeah,
that's nice. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose inadvertently, without even realizing that you guys were pioneers, you put out this stuff, and it's like, it's like the old progressive rock, Pink Floyd, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You were the pioneers, and you, without unwittingly, you were doing all this stuff. And I think for after the 8-bits, I mean, people will say to me, "Oh, what happened to your C64?" I says, "Oh, I gave it away." Why did you? Well, and looking back now, that's stupid. But back in 1986, I wasn't interested in the C64. I wanted a Commodore Amiga. I wanted an ST, and and what was I going to say? You don't really, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I've completely forgot my train of thought. But you don't realize that at that point that this is going to be, where I was going to go with. So from about the mid 80s to kind of probably about 2000, I think when the internet came along, when I first got my internet, it's to run the cable tell my mum, I'm going to be on the internet. Can you not use the phone for half an hour? Plug it in, run downstairs, plug it into the modem, AOL, boom, dial up. And the first thing I typed was Commodore. I typed into Yahoo Commodore 64. Jeff Minter. Oh, Jeff Minter. And then before you know it, you've got all these. And then suddenly that just sparked the whole explosion of the interest. And I don't like calling them retro games, because when you talk about the Beatles, you don't see retro music. You don't refer to I don't know, you don't refer to the Towering Inferno as a retro film. You look upon it, that's a great film. It's the same with games. Pipeline's not a retro game, it's a game. It's an early game.
It's there of its time. It was there. It stands alone, and they aren't currently making the Pipeline film version 4 or anything. It's just stands there back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even I had big hair then.
What's that?
Even I had big hair then.
The big mullet like me. I had the Ian Botham moustache and the big mullet. Terrible. So if you were still making games now, I mean, obviously you're probably aware, like a game like the latest Call of Duty, there's probably, the budget's probably 60 million, and there's probably like 1,000 people. Would you swap what you did back then with a team of guys to what it is now?
It's different, but I'll bet that somewhere there is a small team of guys who are saying, wouldn't it be good if this happened? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be great if you did this, and instead of what everybody else thinks is going to happen, something else happened, and you could learn it and you could make it happen. And somewhere in there there'll be some influential, real basic designers who never write code. They just want this event to happen. But the games are so massive now, it just can't be an event. It's got to be a whole new theme that you could open up within the game, that people would, if you discovered it and it wasn't totally trailered all the way through, then that could, I don't know, there wasn't a social media aspect at all when Taskset was going around, but you talk to your mates about it. We found that small town Bridlington, but people would still come knock on the door to come and talk to us because they could. So we did. But they would talk then amongst all of their friends, and that was as close to social media as you could get. Mm-hmm. But now, if you wanted to do it's difficult to do a secret feature, isn't it? Yeah. Because the marketing men will tell everybody about it first and then try and hide it again. So
can you imagine somebody going to I can't even remember the name of the guy that owns EA Sports, whatever it is, or EA. Can you imagine them saying, I've got a great idea, you play the part of this guy, he goes to the pub, he gets absolutely pissed, and then he's got to try and walk home and not and be like, away you go, or a pipeline. I mean, it's just, I think that's why I don't really play modern games. They're just the same formula. It's a safe. Let's make another Call of Duty 5 or whatever the hell it is. They're just safe. There's no experimentation now.
Absolutely right. You are spot on, because whenever I play anything modern at all, I arrive, I get killed. I arrive, I got killed again. I drop into situations and I never see more than 10 or 15 seconds of the game before I'm dead. You need to invest a huge amount of time and mates along to get you through these things now.
Here's the thing, Andy, is my mate, it was on the Xbox 360, he completed, I can't remember what it was called, Mass Effect or something it's called. It's a first-person shooter. And he's like, I said, what you been up to? I completed Mass Effect. I went, all right, how long did that take you? 100 hours. I went, I can think of better things to do with my time. I was not I was not the slightest. I wasn't even 0.5% impressed that he'd completed that.
That's a shame for a minute.
If I got 1 million in Defender, I'd be writing the phone to you. Guess what, Andy? I've got 100 million. You'd be like, whoa! That's a badge of honour. People, I would boast about it.
Yeah.
You know, I got 20,000 at Berserk at Play Glasgow, and one of the guys that actually he runs the show, he came up and he's standing over me. He's like, "Chris, you're doing well there, mate. That's a cracking score." And I felt I was the man. I went home that night and it was MAM. It was I still had the highest score, and awesome. You know, you get a good. You get to the 5th level of Defender. You're the man.
Oh, nah, yeah, heaven. But it's so fast that nobody else can see it. By the time you're up there, Jesus, that's incredible. But it doesn't mean that modern games are crap.
No, not at all.
I don't understand them. I'm obviously in the wrong place, and it's not my thing. But
the thing
it would be great if somebody really. Wouldn't it be great if somebody discovered something deep within a really mass media game that hadn't been trailed, and they could actually expose it? They could launch it themselves and say, we can cross this barrier here. We can go this whole new land. We can do all this whole new thing that was never trailed. That I don't know if it exists because I don't know enough about.
I suppose the closest I can think of was something like Minecraft, something like that. It became, that was. I mean, the guy became. I think he sold it to. Was it for 20 billion or something? It was something insane.
Huge, wasn't it?
It's mental. But there's just not the same. There's just not the same inventiveness. I think there's too much a gamble, too much money. You're not going to put out a game that might sell and then you lose 20 million, and that would be the end of it. But so just kind of before I kind of finish up, Andy, have you got any interesting anecdotes? Were there any tales of medicinal substances, loose women, and hot tubs involved, like the lads in Atari? Did you guys partake in any of these kind of activities?
Good Lord, this was a British seaside town. What are you thinking of?
You can't possibly tell me.
Yeah, closest you'll get to that is a saucy postcard, isn't it? No, it was different. It really was different. It was not, it was not sex and drugs and rock and roll, but it was. It was. It really was a genuine giggle.
It was cups of tea and digestive biscuits, I'm guessing, eh?
And beer.
So very finally, last question, Andy. Commodore 64 or Spectrum?
Oh, Commodore 64. Easy. Nice and easy. Love it.
Oh, awesome. Listen, Andy, just to very finish off, do you mind if we just listen to the wee tunes on Super Pipeline?
Lovely. Yeah.
Let's just bask in the glory of the tunes. Right, let me just get rid of that. I've even got it. This is Super Pipeline, the original. Can you hear that okay, Andy? Yeah?
I certainly can, yeah.
I mean, I made that about 9 seconds.
That's not as I remember it. Blimey.
I can hardly hear you, Andy. Sorry, just with the noise. Hang on. You can see a lot of lobster.
Love it. You know it, don't you? You just know it. Not American in any way, is it? Yeah. That's fabulous, isn't it?
Oh, that's the sound of the hammer. Let's see, we'll finish off with Super Pipeline 2.
A long time since I heard them all together.
What's that?
It's a long time since I heard them all together. Paul Hodgson also would love this.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Let's just finish off with them.
Drives you on, doesn't it?
What's that?
It drives you on. You can see him there.
Awesome. 3, 4 to go. Alexa, be quiet. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. I've got to say, I think the music in the first one, I prefer the music in the first one, but I prefer
the delivery in the second is better, isn't it?
Yeah. So a lot of these, some of these, there was the what was it called? The Floral Dance with Terry Wogan, that was on there.
Yeah.
South Bank Show.
Yeah.
The one that goes dee 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 dee. Was that original tune or was that based on a?
No, it's not original. It's, I should know. God, I've slept since then. I can't remember, but it's not original. At the very most, you would say it was inspired by.
I think that's the wonderful thing about the early games. You could release a game and call it Centipede, and you could just feature whatever, and nobody cared. Nobody cared.
No, because it works, and you got to the bottom.
What's that?
And you got to the bottom, so it's a great game. That's the difference. Yeah.
Right, listen, Andy, apologies. I said about an hour and a half. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. So listen, it's been an absolute blast. I've had an absolute blast talking to you. I really do hope we can get down for a pint at some point when things get back to normal.
We've got to do it. Absolutely.
So listen, Andy, thanks for taking time. Anytime you fancy coming on, what I'd love to do at some point is get a wee live stream on a Sunday night, going playing Taskset games, and you can just be on and do a bit of commentary. You fancy that at some point?
Gosh, yeah. I don't have any Sunday nights. Jesus.
Well, you let me know when you can fit me in. But listen, Andy, thank you very, very much for taking time to chat to me. I will send you the link once I've got the video uploaded and that as well. But it's been an absolute pleasure. So thanks for taking time, eh?
I've really enjoyed this. Thank you. Thank you for contacting me just out of the blue, and thanks for just being a genuine person.
Oh, thank you very much.
Everything. It's brilliant.
Thanks very much, Andy. Cheers. And listen, good luck to England on Saturday. Is it Saturday?
Did you say those words? That's.
I'm only kidding.
That's better. That's better.
Anyway, Andy, listen, mate. Take care, buddy.
You too. Have a blast.
See you, man.
And there you go.
Cheers, Andy.
Good for you.
See you, mate. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.